All right, so I hope everybody is doing well, and I'm kind of excited about this video. So um, I'm trying to do, or I started doing a series of conversations with the other side, and interviews and stuff like that. I've talked to a lot of people over the past few years, and I thought it'd be a great idea to start putting that into some sort of format to share with people. So. And I've said in some of my other videos, but that's one of the things I'm grateful for about developing the ability to communicate um, with people in the afterlife is the just the amount of people that you could talk to and how nice and willing they are to do that. Well, that being said, I did a video and I've talked to him quite a bit too. And so I did a video about Bruce Lee, and I've talked to him quite a bit, a lot actually. So um, over the course of the past few years, and also to put together this conversation, this interview video. So I was a big fan of his movies growing up, and um, he is he lived in Seattle for a while, which is pretty cool because that's where I was born and raised too. So and I watched a lot of his movies, and I was a fan of his son's movies too, who I've also talked to growing up. Um, so we had a great time putting this information together, and I'm definitely excited to share it with you. So I'm going to start with I'll bring up some Wikipedia pages, to show you some photos and information and stuff, just to help kind of bring the story to life and help illustrate it a little bit. Okay, so here we go. All right, so I think Bruce Lee is one of those names that everybody knows, I think. So, and of course, there's all kinds of stuff that you can read about it, that you can read about or research online. But here's his Wikipedia page, and it talks about his background and everything, which is kind of where we started when we were chatting. So it talks about in here, and that's one of the main reasons I remember him moving over here too, was as he was growing up, he got in a lot of fights. And because of that, so he was actually okay. So Bruce Lee is one of those people I think that everybody knows. Like he's kind of like Bob Marley. Everybody knows that name, and is pretty familiar with who he is. And so, of course, here's his Wikipedia page, and if you want to read more about it, you can definitely do that. And there's a ton of great information online. So, of course, just to kind of summarize, he was known for his martial arts and his movies. So, we talked about kind of as I was reading through here, I think I mentioned on here. This is where I got it from. So he actually grew up fighting a lot, and got in trouble at school and even with the police a few times. So and fought. He was in a kung fu club or school, a certain school, and they would challenge each other and they would have fights too. So I asked him because he had so many fights, like at school and like outside of school or like in the neighborhood, and just like between clubs and everything like that. I said, you weren't like a bully, like you weren't starting these fights, were you? So, and he said, oh no, not at all. So um, that was one of the questions I asked him. I was just curious because it doesn't really say that, it doesn't go into detail. At least here, I haven't read, a lot of his biographies or anything like that are out there. But he said, No, I was not so a bully at all. He said absolutely not, and he said he did fight to protect others, and they were fair fights too. You know, like self defense or a challenge, and so very much. And I kind of figured too. I mean, he has a good reputation, and as far as like upholding good values and stuff like that. And and so I just thought it was a good question, and because it didn't really go into detail, and I had to ask. You know, he's a very confident guy, and so I was just curious. I was like, oh, interesting. You know, like were you the one starting all those fights? And he was like, no, no, no. He goes, that wasn't me. So um, he's super nice too, by the way, and he's got a great sense of humor. And we had a really, really great time talking back and forth. So, of course, he died early, unfortunately. So he had he wasn't feeling well one day, and actually took something for to make his headache go away. And then let me look it up. And there's a lot of questions about what happened here. Um, Yeah, that's right. So they go into detail about it here, and I did ask him about this because that's one of the biggest. There's a lot of speculation. Here's a picture of his gravesite, actually, in Seattle, Washington. He's buried next to his son, and a lot of people have gone there. I actually have a lot of friends too that have been there in person to see that. I never have personally, but I love these guys growing up. And oops, sorry about that. I love these guys growing up and their movies and that sort of thing. So, but never been there personally. So. Um, I had asked because there was a lot of speculation. Was he because he uh, got in trouble with like the kung fu or martial arts community from China in the United States, teaching to foreigners or outsiders. So and there was a lot of disagreement with him doing that, but he felt that these teachings were for everybody. So and because of that, his death, there was a lot of question around, you know, was he killed? Was it because he had involvement with organized crime? He actually beat up the sons of some like crime bosses over in Hong Kong, actually. So, and of course, you know, there was the people who disagreed with him teaching martial arts to outsiders. So a lot of people thought, you know, um, was his death murder? So I did ask him that and ask, was it truly a reaction to this medication, or was it, you know, something murder, something more along the lines of murder? And he said, let me see, I have an exact answer here, just checking my notes. He said he confirmed that this was his cause of death. So, and again, these things are when you die, these things are everything's preserved, our lives and everything like that, and we're able to review them after we die and enter the afterlife. To a T, the details of these things are known. So he does have that information and the proof, that sort of thing, what caused his death, and to support that as well. So there's zero room for speculation, in other words, and it was a reaction to that. So, and then I actually said, so, you know, that's really frustrating, you know, him dying young. And he was just like really starting to realize his career too, and one of the biggest movie stars in the world, and was just getting that going too. And plus his philosophy, and he was inclusive and wanted to teach everybody, and was also you know, a huge movie star, and just all around, you know, well liked and just getting started. So I had mentioned to him that that's so frustrating, his death, you know, and something like this that is so simple and possibly even avoidable, you know, and to think like what he could have accomplished and, you know, where he could have been if it weren't for that. So, and I asked him, like, does that make you angry? Does that frustrate you at all? And he said, no, not at all. He said, it's one of those things that happens sometimes. So those are his exact words. I made sure I wanted to write them down just like I heard them. So word for word. So we talked about, we had some really cool conversations about his style. So he was developing his own style. It's called Jeet Kune Do, and it was his own version of Kung Fu, and it means way of the intercept. I should know this. It's called Way of the Intercepting Fist, I think. Let's find out. So, okay. Here it is. Yep, so his personal philosophy and experiences of Bruce Lee. So, let me see. Okay, yeah, so this represents the symbol and everything, anyways, having no limitation, as limitation, using no way as way. So, in other words, like we were talking when I was talking to him, like a style without any style, basically, is exactly how we were discussing it. So, Jeet Kune Do, let's see. Still trying to figure out what it means, actually. So, this, you know what? I'll have to get back to that. I think it has to do. I swear it's called like the way, the intercepting fist or something like that, or something along those lines. But this actually sums up the philosophy really well, at least right here. So we were talking about that, and it's basically the evolution of. It's a philosophy, like it says here, a continuous evolution of like martial arts, as we were talking about it. So he was saying too, like it's basically a styles are limiting. I'm trying to remember our exact conversation. So styles are usually limited. They have form and technique and that sort of thing. This is meant to adapt to that sort of thing continuously, and also study to anticipate your opponent's moves and that sort of thing, but also learn from every encounter so you can continually evolve the style. Because everything basically can be studied and understood, applied, countered, and like evolved basically. So it's never ending. And to be able to be adapt basically and not limit yourself to one style and always continue, like have that mindset basically is what we were talking about. So it was really cool. And it's something that he's still working on and evolving in the afterlife. So picked up just where he left off basically, and working on that style and continuing to develop moves and that sort of thing. So I asked him my next question. I actually asked him, "What do you think of modern day MMA?" So I'm for a long time too, not as much anymore, but I was actually a huge fan of mixed martial arts and martial arts growing up too. So, but he said, I asked him, "What do you think of modern day MMA?" He said, "I find it fascinating, a hybrid form of fighting, and I think it's a great idea." So that was his exact answer. And then I asked him, I actually watched UFC 1 a long time ago when it first came out. And I asked him, would you have fought in, UFC had it occurred like UFC 1? If you were in your 20s or 30s, I think he would have been older when it came out. But, if he was in the peak shape of his life, in other words, he said, and he told me, I'm not sure if I would have for sure, but would have loved to participate had I known about it at the time, he said. So that's interesting because I've actually seen videos on that too. Like, what would he be like if he was still around, and how his style and philosophy would have evolved, and how he would compare against like modern day fighters, boxers, martial artists, especially MMA, which is like a hybrid of American boxing, kickboxing, and grappling, basically. So really interesting. To think about that sort of thing. And so I also asked him so I asked him some random questions too. We were having casual conversations too. Some of this occurred during the interview, some of this is pieced together from other conversations we actually had in the past. So and let's see. So let's kind of segue into his family a little bit. So because I did mention Brandon Lee. So Brandon Lee was the son. He died early too, unfortunately, and he was in a lot of television shows and movies growing up, and he was just getting started too. And there was actually a lot of speculation about whether his death was an accident or not. And he actually confirmed for me 100%. It was a complete accident, just an on-site accident. There is nothing, zero question about whether this was planned or a murder or that sort of thing. And he said, I can confirm that. And he also told me I can vouch for Michael Massey. He's the one who actually pulled the trigger that fired the gun, if I remember right. He said, I can absolutely vouch for him, and was 100%, very matter of fact about that. So that answers those two questions about their deaths, whether they were planned. Absolutely not. Both just random, unfortunately, at early stages in their life. And again, it was pretty tragic for that to happen. But so I did ask, because I was a big fan of Brandon Lee too growing up. I think a lot of people were. So he was in movies like The Crow. I loved Kung Fu growing up too. This one here. And Rapid Fire, I actually owned that one. I actually owned Showdown in Little Tokyo too. Laser Mission is horrible. That is such a bad movie. And I told them that too. I don't even remember if I saw that growing up, to be honest, but I watched it and it's terrible. It's such a bad movie. And I told them that and we laughed about it. So Showdown in Little Tokyo was a great movie too. It was awesome. I saw it a ton of times growing up, but I watched it again, it was a couple of years ago actually. It was like 20, 30 years later. It is terrible, but it's like one of those movies that is so good when you're little. I mean, now that it's just so good, it's bad. And I totally loved watching it with Brandon and Bruce, believe it or not. So before I bought it, and then I wanted to watch it and actually asked to watch that with them. And they were totally up for it. But man, it was so bad, but it was great. It's still one of my favorite movies growing up. But this one, Laser Mission, isn't one of those things like, man, it's so good. And then, you watch it later and it's like, oh, it's a great movie. It's just bad all around. So that's Brandon. He's really he's a great guy too. Everybody that I talk to is so nice. And I'll talk about that in another video too, a separate video. But so I had asked Bruce also, because in the afterlife, spiritual beings, all of them are real. Everything that we've ever documented on Earth, plus remember, like infinity as a concept, because it's real, and I'm going to do more videos on this. Infinity is true. The afterlife is real. Life is eternal. We live forever once we die here physically. And because infinity is a template or a baseline for everything, there's eternal life, there's eternal possibility, there's eternal anything. In other words, everything's possible without limits. That being said, so as far as Chinese religion and beliefs go, that there's a goddess. Her name is Kuan Yin. She has a ton of different names in different parts of Asia. A real popular, well-known deity, and a goddess of mercy. And sometimes also known, I know, in New Age circles, and I think Buddhism as well, a goddess of compassion and love as well. So she represents that sort of thing. Here's a picture of her. Actually, I've first communicated with her a few years back, and of course, very, very polite, very intelligent, infinite everything, along those lines, and a very real goddess. I told her this isn't a very flattering statue, and it looks so casual. It looks like she's like fishing on a fishing dock and should be holding a cigarette. So we laughed about that pretty good. But you can look this up on Wikipedia too. I actually asked Bruce, have you met Kuan Yin, and he said, oh yes. So he said, yes, I did meet her, in fact. And his exact words, she is very nice, by the way. So, and she really is. If you think about infinite passion, I mean, not passion, compassion, sorry, infinite humor, infinite patience, and infinite kindness and infinite intelligence. Remember, anything that you could equate to eternal or limitless, she represents that. So, very, very wonderful person, very, very nice indeed whenever you speak to her. So, um, and I told Bruce, I said, yeah, that's great. I've actually met her too a few years ago, and she is very nice. And she told me actually, I told him too. I said, she told me that your stance is off and that your left side is weak. So he actually he responded to that and said, really? Okay. I absolutely made sure I heard his response to that. So he said, really? I'll look into that. I thought it was balanced myself. So I was just kidding. But I told him, I'm just kidding, by the way, but thanks for answering that. And his exact words were, yes, of course. Thank you for letting me know. He's so he's so polite, but he does laugh a lot. So and took that very seriously. It's just really funny, but laughed afterwards. So got a really great sense of humor, and he did down here too, actually. So and then I actually asked him. Um, Let me see. What's the next question that I asked him? So, oh yeah, and then, okay. So we had some casual, random conversations after that. I actually asked him, "What are you doing in the afterlife these days?" So um, movies. I'll get to that in a moment. Continuing to develop his Jeet Kune Do system, spending time with friends and family, meeting gods and goddesses, of course. And he said. In addition to that, he said, meeting people. I love meeting people and I love sharing stories with others. And he said, I love that sort of thing. So just, and I can only imagine because not just Earth and not just every kind of, people from Earth, people from other planets physically here, which is a whole nother video. It's awesome. I won't get into that at all right now, actually. But, and then, of course, a limitless variety of beings and people that were born or created or evolved in the afterlife, which is just really anything you can think of. So I can only imagine just meeting and being able to talk to people and just spending, all eternity, like taking your time doing that sort of thing. So that's pretty cool. And I actually asked him to a bunch of random questions. So I asked him what your favorite Chinese dish is because I love Chinese food, and I told him mine is mapo tofu. I'll show you a picture actually. So I've got that right here. I absolutely love this dish, and here's some pictures of it here too. It's one of my favorite things to get at Chinese restaurants. So these are different varieties of it. And I told him mine is mapo tofu, and one of several though. It's not my absolute favorite, but it's one of a bunch. I just love Chinese food so a lot, and this is just one of my favorite dishes. So, and he said I have several favorite dishes as well. So mapo tofu is actually one of them. He said it's one of my favorite dishes as well. Believe it or not, is what he said. So it's really good stuff. If you haven't tried it, I totally suggest you try it. But there's a ton of varieties, and like any dish, there's bad and there's different versions of it, and it could be really spicy or not. So. But I totally recommend trying it. I'm getting kind of hungry thinking about it, actually. Excuse me. So, and then I asked him, so have you done, this is really cool, have you done more movies in the afterlife? And he said yes. So I asked him, what can you give me one of the names of them? And he told me, where is it? I wrote it down. Okay, so Kung Fu Master is actually the name of the movie. Actually, I laughed a little bit, and I told him that's not very original. I don't know, he's Bruce Lee, I thought he was going to tell me something really cool, like really, really awesome. But I told him that's not very original. I was expecting something different. But I asked him, have you done any movies with your son yet, with Brandon Lee? He said, yeah. He said, that's one. He goes right there. He said, that's a movie that we did together, actually. In the afterlife, it's called Kung Fu Master, believe it or not. So that's really awesome just to hear that and to know that, and the fact that, of course, they're able to spend time again, and just like we all will, once we get over there, but that they're kind of picking up where they never left off, and then they're able to share their passions with each other, similar passions, movie and martial arts, and do that with each other, because we never got to see that down here. So I think that's pretty cool. And that's not the only movie, but that's the only movie that name that I got from him. So after that, so I also asked him, okay, so if you fought, I asked him, so if you fought John Saxon, so if any of you have seen Enter the Dragon, John Saxon, I've talked to him too. I've talked to everybody I've mentioned actually here in the video. Believe it or not, they're all here as well. So immediately available. And so I always ask them, well, can you do this with me? I'm putting this together, and can you watch it with me and be present and everything? And they all are. So 100% of the time. So, and I know that I know they're laughing too at some of this. We had a good time making this. So John Saxon, he died too, unfortunately, just a couple years ago, recently. But he was in Enter the Dragon, and he was one of the main characters, along with Jim Kelly. John Saxon was an actor. Jim Kelly was a martial artist who became an actor. And he was also in Enter the Dragon. They mentioned that right here. He died back in 2013, unfortunately. So, but they're super cool. I loved this movie growing up, and it was really cool to talk to them both. I asked Bruce, if you fought John Saxon, who would win? So he said, let me see, where's my notes again? Oh, no, I'm sorry. I said, who would win in a fight? This is my first question. I'm sorry. So, who would win in a fight? John Saxon versus Jim Kelly, who would win? And he said, I would say John, believe it or not. So he picked John Saxon if they fought in real life. Actually, I don't even know if they did, if they sparred or that sort of thing in the afterlife. But that was a question I asked him, and that's what he said. And then I said, how about you versus John Saxon? And he said, myself. So I kind of figured he'd say that. And I kind of figured he'd win too. And then I asked him, how about you or Jim Kelly? And he said, myself. I would have said Bruce too. So I totally wasn't surprised with that answer. It was really cool to hear that. So, and then I said, how about you against John Saxon and Jim Kelly at the same time? And he said, maybe myself. So there was a little bit, it went from myself to maybe myself. So maybe. So we didn't get too much into that, but I don't know. Maybe they're pretty good, or maybe 2 against 1, or maybe he was just being humble and polite. I think he'd kick the crap out of him if it was him versus both of them, to be honest. So I think he was just being nice. I also asked. So speaking of fighting, let me see. Make sure I got all these answers here. So speaking of MMA earlier, I don't know if anybody watches mixed martial arts, but Kimbo Slice, so he died a few years ago, unfortunately. And he just got started in mixed martial arts. He was actually known for street fighting, and I've actually watched all his street fight videos. Like when he first started getting popular, I watched him all the time. I absolutely love fighting, and so cool to meet him. And he is as nice as he seemed in real life, if not nicer. He's like one of the coolest guys you could ever meet. And I get a chance to talk to him like all the time, actually. So I asked Bruce, if your son, if Brandon Lee fought Kimbo, I told him, be fair. I said, who do you think would win? So he said Um, all right, so I'm sorry, I'm trying to find his answer in here. I think I remember what it was, but I just want to be sure. Okay, so oh yeah, that's right, it was. So I said if they had gotten a bare knuckle fight, because Kimbo used to fight street fighting, um, no rules. They had some basic rules, of course, to make it fair, but no equipment, just bare knuckle fighting. And if I remember right, God, he in all the ones that he got into, he won every single one. The only one that was even the one that he didn't win was basically a tie, and they um, beat the crap out of each other, and they both went the distance, and they were just both exhausted and just like totally destroyed at the end of the fight. As far as his fist fights go, so he was real tough and real humble guy too. Just such a nice guy. It's one of the things I loved about him, and still do, of course. And he's still that same guy, which is just totally awesome. So I asked Bruce if they got in a bare knuckle fight. He's big too. If you see his stats right there, 6'2", 225. I don't know if they have Brandon's stats on here, but oh no, they don't. But I mean, he wasn't a huge guy, so I was just curious, what his answer would be, and I asked him, "What is your totally objective answer, and what is your totally subjective answer?" To be as fair as possible. And he picked Brandon for both. So he said, I was actually curious what he'd say, but he said Brandon would win. That's my objective answer. Brandon would win. That's his subjective answer. So I actually totally disagree. So I think Brandon might be quick and might have some power. If it was bare knuckle, and that's Kimbo's bread and butter, and that is his natural environment, and he can take a punch. He doesn't go down, that sort of thing. And Brandon wasn't really trained in grappling, as far as I know, anyways. So stand-up fighting, I think Kimbo all the way, and he's just way bigger. He could absorb those hits. I'm sure Brandon was a tough guy, but I don't think he could take too many hits from Kimbo's slice. I think after a few, he wouldn't be standing. I think it would just be a done deal. So I totally disagree with you politely with that one, Bruce. So after that, I had, I think that was just about all my questions, but I did have one very important final question for Bruce. So I did want to know, I asked him, where's my notes here? So just being, who he was, and a celebrity, and here we go. Plus a really smart guy, very intelligent, and he had a life philosophy, and just being Bruce Lee, and also being, one of the biggest worldwide movie stars and martial artists ever, arguably. I really had to know his opinion on one thing. So I asked him, if you had to choose one between Betty White and Bea Arthur, and I told him you can't flip a coin, and I told him they're both wonderful, and you can't say both. You have to pick one. Who would you pick over the other, and why, if you had to select one? And I told him I want reasons, Bruce. I told him I want actual reasons. I don't want. I told him you have to pick one, and you have to give me a reason. So, and I wrote down his exact answer. So he said, "Well, if I had to pick, but only because I have to pick one, Betty is my choice. But only because I have to pick one." That's exactly what he said, and I laughed so hard. And it was so funny. So did he, actually. I was trying to put him on the spot, and he came up with that was just like it was a great answer, like, but he had to answer. So, and I told him I still want a reason, Bruce, and and it was because and mind you guys, only because he has to pick one. If he had to answer, it's because she smiled more on Earth. So I found this picture online, and I thought it was the funniest one, and this totally sums it up. They're both wonderful too, of course. And I spoke to both, and they're both here. Believe it or not, so it was, I spoke to Rue and Estelle, all four of them. They're absolutely great, equally great, by the way, and really sweet, and absolutely wonderful. I actually talked to them before Betty White had died, and was after she did cross over. It was absolutely sad, of course, but I was also a little bit excited to be able to speak with her. So just knowing that she'll be, like we all will, in a better place one day, and excited at the prospect of being able to speak to her in that state. When you die and wake up and just everything is perfect and made whole as usual. So, and she's just as sweet as she was on Earth. So is B, and I sure hope B's smiling right now. But we did talk, and they're great to joke around with. Of course, everybody, like I said, everybody just so patient and are so kind and have a great sense of humor. Especially now that they're all, I said in another video too, when we're in the afterlife and everything is, we feel great infinitely. Our health is restored. Happiness is infinite. Patience and calm is infinite. Everything we feel on earth, but perfect, and everybody is just that in that state of being when you talk to them. So they're the same people, of course, but just everybody is experiencing, like heaven, the afterlife. So it's wonderful to be able to speak to everyone. And I've talked to all of them, everyone here, and asked them all to be here and part of this interview. So, and that was my last question, actually. So that's what I talked to Bruce about. And in case you were ever wondering, that is what he's up to in the afterlife. His thoughts on fighting, what he is doing there, and it's great that he got a chance to do a movie with Brandon. I think that was awesome to hear. And then, of course, to get those questions answered, both about how they died and to put a rest, an end to any speculation. And of course, most importantly, who he likes better, Betty White or B. Arthur. But only if he had to pick one. Only if he had to, which he did, and he picked Betty. But we all love B. All right, so that is the conversation, the interview that I wanted to share. And hopefully it was entertaining and informative. And I get a lot from these conversations, just learning about the nature of the afterlife, how it operates, how people are, and then, being able to share stories and answer questions and fill in details and that sort of thing. I think it's awesome. And I definitely appreciate everyone that had everything to do with that video. Of course, especially Bruce Lee and getting a chance to talk to him. So thank you for that. As always, you guys, and then everybody that watched it as well. So if you have any questions, you can always email me or leave them in the comments, or have any interview suggestions, that sort of thing, or anything like that, any sort of dialogue. I absolutely love that. So again, thank you for watching. Appreciate it. Hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you in the next video. Thank you.